Alright, this is going to be one of those videos where I kind of cover two topics and try to link them together. And the first one I want to talk about was fantasy movie and why most of them suck. There are a few reasons for it, and here I'm going to mix all the medieval fantasy and sword and sorcery together, and I'm not going to make too much distinction, and a lot of what I'm going to talk about also apply to sci-fi. And yeah, those flicks can be good, some like tacky fun, but we know that most of them are not great movie. So let's clear out one of the obvious problems out of the way. Low budget. Yeah, of course, if the sets and the props look cheap, it can take us out of the experience. But I don't think this is an unsurmountable problem. And many did great things with low budget. Also, I think if the studio believes you can have something good, they'll be able to raise your budget. But the budget issue is going to be linked to another issue I'm going to talk about in a moment. But first, I wanted to mention some other thing. And it's something I talked about before. It's taking the material seriously. If you have a director or writer that just treat the material as something goofy, the audience won't be able to take it seriously either. And nobody wants to see some sort of story that's supposed to be about human struggle when the people involved think it's a stupid concept. If you think that what you're doing is stupid, the audience will feel it and will treat it as stupid as well. And I don't have time for stupid stuff. The main problem I see with many fantasy movie or TV show is that oftentimes they are made about the fantasy. I love the fantasy is just like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if X, wouldn't it be cool if wizard were real? Wouldn't it be cool if they were dragon and stuff like that? And the movie or the series become a vehicle to expose the world and the fantastical element at the detriment of the story. The story often take a second place to exposing all the cool fantastical stuff. But that's not why people watch movie or TV show. People watch for drama and conflict. It needs to be about the people and their struggle and how they interact with themselves and one another. It's not about the setting. The setting is there as a backdrop and it can help sell a story. It can serve a story, but it cannot replace the story or supersede it. And this is also where the link with the budget comes in. If you have a low budget, focusing on stuff that require VFX is even a worse idea. Focus on people. And if you have a story, or you can have like a story or a movie of a survival movie, when it's a person against the environment, and those can be great movie, but really what they are about is about the protagonist. It's still about the character or a group of characters. And in the struggle they go through. That's what even if you have a guy alone, what you're drawn to is by the emotion the protagonist goes through. The conflict he can have with himself when he feels like giving up, but he find back some resolve. That can speak to us. But yeah, human interaction is what we are drawn to. And if you think of fantasy movie or show that add some success, that is what you'll find. Interesting characters, great interaction, emotion, and drama. You look at stuff like Conan or Excalibur of Game of Thrones when it was still good, and this is what it was about. And that's actually a part of the mistake that Game of Thrones made. At some point, it became more about the dragons and battles, and the characters were no longer consistent and no longer driving the plot. They didn't act in a way that makes sense, so it sucked. And this idea of drama being about humans is even important when the elites want to sell a war to the population that is gonna go fight this war for them. If you look at the Civil War in the USA, the second Civil War, like not the one in 1776, which was a civil war, it was like more than the other one because it was British subject against the British government, while the War of Northern Aggression is two countries fighting each other. They each had their own government, their own territory, their own official army. Anyway, that's beside the point. But in the War of Northern Aggression, it was an economic war about resources. But that is very difficult to convince the people to fight for that. So they had to come up with some kind of a narrative to justify what the war was about. They had something that could trigger some emotional reaction. So they had to make it about people somehow. Because that's what we as humans react to. And that's true in movie, that's true in TV show, and as you guessed it, it's also true in role-playing. I'm an advocate for lower fantasy setting because I think that the fantastical element can distract from the people. I said in my last video not to spend so much time focusing on how the world was created and how magic works and the ecology of dragon and stuff like that. Create interesting characters in PCs that are believable, that are complex, that are engaging. Create networks of relation between them. Think about what they want, what are they willing to do to get it, and this is where you're gonna get the most mileage out of your game prep. And this brings me to the other topic I want to talk about briefly. What is role playing? Role playing happens when you have interaction between characters. It can be between two PCs or between PCs and NPCs. And yes, it could be between a PC and himself, like a character and himself in some sort of soliloquy, but that can be hard to pull off and can be boring for the other people at the table. So maybe not focus on that. But yeah, roleplay is interactions between characters. That's why solo gaming is solo gaming. It's not solo roleplay. You don't really roleplay with yourself. Can you have roleplay during combat or during wilderness exploration? Sure, but the roleplay doesn't happen between a character and the environment. It doesn't really happen between a character and an unintelligent monster either. If you're in a fight and you're controlling your character to kill monster, you're engaging with the game aspect of RPG in a more or less tactical manner, depending on the game you're playing. But the fact that you're controlling your character doesn't mean you're role-playing. And that's why I advocate for low fantasy, human-centric world. It increases the opportunity to role-play. And by using humans, it makes a lot of the heavy lifting for you in both design and exposition. Because we know how humans are and how they think and how they act. Even if we're not master of psychology or praxeology, we still have an intuitive understanding of humans' behavior and what motivates them. So yeah, if you want more roleplay in your game, understanding what roleplay is and increasing the opportunity of roleplay might be a good idea. And by the way, interaction with vendors, they don't necessarily count. you could have roleplay there, but if your vendor are just like basically like vending machine, maybe you're better off like just skipping the shopping session and just like abstracting them. That's all right too. There's nothing wrong with that at all, because there could be like roleplay there, but this roleplay could get into the way of the story. Or I shouldn't say story because that is gonna sound like it's scripted, but like of the drama. And this is why I want to talk about fantasy movie at the start of the video, and how good movies are about people and the emotion they go through. And it's the same with good role play. Not necessarily with good role playing game or with good session, because you can have those sessions that are more tactical and combat focused, and those can be fun too. But when you want the role play, remember that it's about interaction between characters and their desires and the emotion they go through. Don't ham you up with the ham it up with the acting. Be subtle. We'll understand how the character feels if the feelings make sense and the way they act is according to it, and they should. And as a GM, if you want your player to roleplay, understand where to put the effort in characterizing people. So I hope this was useful. Thank you for watching, and let me know what you think about all that in the insult section below. Thank you for watching. Have a good day and take care.